Today we're going to talk about weak hands and strong hands, the market shifts, and my view on the Pokemon card market today. Before we get started and talk about my view on the market, I want to give a quick shout out and a quick thank you to all of you from all the comments and the support I received in the last video. I'm actually really surprised by how many views we had, how many comments, the amount of people that are still here, actually still on the channel and still subscribed. Very surprised by that. And I just want to thank you again for the support. If you like the video and you appreciate the content, of course, leave a like, subscribe. Also, I did finally figure out how to add the thank you button, so you can always send me a thanks as well. Another quick shout out to a lot of really fantastic questions in the comment section. I'd really like to answer some of those. I'd love to do it in video format because as my former patrons know, when I had a Patreon, I can really dissect a topic quite in depth. But I really like to get to some of those because there were some fantastic questions. It's just a question of whether I'll be able to find the time to do that. But just letting you guys know, I do see those questions. I really appreciate the positive comments, and I love those very good questions, and I'm hoping I can address them soon. All right, now let's talk about the market. Weak hands. Now, I want to discuss a little bit about weak hands. When we talk about weak hands in the market, I think there's a little bit of a misconception, and I want to make sure that we have a little bit of understanding and compassion for weak hands, because weak hands, it seems to be a little bit more synonymous with people who don't believe in something and they are not true believers and they sell because they're scared or they're panicking. We have to remember there's two sides of the coin, and there's a lot of reasons that people may be forced to sell. Sometimes it might be due to personal circumstances. Maybe something random happens, maybe something important where they need to cover costs, maybe a big life change can cause people to shift their priorities. And so when we say weak hands, we have to understand that that's a market term and it's not necessarily someone's mentality. And that means that someone could sell for a variety of reasons and for very important and significant reasons. And so when we say we have weak hands, don't downgrade or speak poorly about people that may have sold during the bear market. We never know someone's situation, but this is important times where if you have strong hands, this is where those times are really important as well. And so congratulations if you have those strong hands, those strong investing hands, but at the same time, let's have compassion for people that maybe are not in quite the same situation. This is a tough time for a lot of people, and maybe they had to sell for a variety of circumstances. Now, with that said, with regards to the Pokemon card market, in my view, the weak hands are beginning, or maybe they have already flushed out. And what I mean by that is that the best, the harder to find cards, the most interesting and the most desirable cards, those cards are starting to dry up and supply is starting to shrink. Now, I wish I could name specific cards. I view a lot of different areas of the hobby, but let's just say overall, I've seen a lot of cards starting to slowly shrink in supply. And that doesn't mean the cards are gone forever. It doesn't mean we're never going to see them again or that there's none available on the market. There will always be cards available, even for the most rare and most highly desirable cards. They'll always be available. But what's important about that is that when the supply starts to shrink, we need to ask ourselves, why is this occurring? And I think one thing that we need to look at and discuss is I've been talking a lot about price drops for the past, I think, year and a half, maybe 2 years now. I've been talking about significant drops in price in the market and in the hobby. And eventually, we have to remember that we reach a tipping point. We reach a point where maybe a lot of these older or higher quality or very desirable, more limited cards, especially cards before the Sword and Shield era that tend to be a little bit more rare or hard to get or a little bit more expensive to acquire. The prices that we're seeing today might just not offer enough incentive to sell anymore. I mean, think about it. Let's use something modern. If we look at my favorite card I like to talk about on this channel, the Amazing Rares. If you bought an Amazing Rare Rayquaza for $40 day one, or if you bought one of the other Amazing Rares for $20 or $10 day one, or 3 months out at the peak prices or some of the high price points, today I'm picking up Amazing Rares for between 50 cents and $1 a piece, maybe a little bit more sometimes, but basically somewhere around 50 cents to $1 a card. And if you paid $10 or $20 for those cards at one point, there's just not much incentive for you to sell that card if you paid $20 for something and now it's selling for $1. What is the point at that stage? You might as well keep the card. And similarly, even if we look at higher priced at more rare cards, it's somewhat of a similar situation. It might be, let's say, a $300 card, a promo card, something that is 5 years old or 10 years old. How much incentive is there for you to sell a card for a few $100s when you know that the ability for you to acquire that card may not come again, or when it does, it might be significantly more expensive? If it used to be a $1,000 card and maybe now it's selling for $300, maybe there's no point for you to sell it anymore. Or if you could afford the card at $1,000, maybe $300 is not such a big deal to you. And so regardless of whether we're talking about $100 cards, $1,000 cards, $1 cards, relative to each person's situation, sometimes when the price drops get this significant, it becomes less incentive and less desirable for you to want to sell those cards at these particular price points. In fact, I had a recent deal for a vintage PSA 10 Holo, and we had agreed upon the price, made the exchange, and it was really interesting because at the point of exchange, there was a moment of hesitation in his hands. So as he gave me the card and I already given him the money, at the point of exchange, there was a pause, just the slightest pause, the slightest hesitation as he handed me the card. And I didn't know this at the time until right at the point of exchange or right after the transaction was officially complete. But I feel like he regretted that decision, because with the prices and the market where they are today, depending where you look, some things are just a little bit too cheap. Or maybe it's not the cheapest, but at that current price point, knowing how difficult it is to acquire some of these cards, and at these prices, collectors are going to come in and they are going to hold on to these cards for a very long time. A lot of these certain items, key items, rare items, older items, they may not see the light of day for a very long time, and that's going to put a limit and a strain on the available supply. And I think that situation illustrates my question of how much sense does it make to sell in this current market environment. And when I talked about in my last video about buying and how I'm buying a little bit more aggressively and I'm really excited about a lot of prices and a lot of things I'm seeing in the market, I'm looking at from their perspective, how much lower can these prices go? Now, does that mean prices are going to stop falling? Does that mean that this is the bottom? Does that mean that prices are going to start rising from here? And we don't have an answer to that. The prices could absolutely continue to fall from here. Maybe this is the bottom and prices only continue to rise. And so yes, it's a classic statement. Prices could go up or prices could go down. And so what is the difference? Why am I talking about this if all I'm going to say is the prices could go up or the price could go down? And what's different now is that the deals and the cards, the quality of the cards are drying up. I'm competing against more buyers and less sellers than I was several months ago. I'm buying and I'm still buying and I'm still searching, but what I'm seeing is not as good and it's not as often as I was before. In fact, I'd say the last several months of PWCC auctions have been a very weak lineup in terms of Pokemon. There hasn't been nearly as many top tier quality cards. The same can be said for eBay. A lot of cards that I used to see in the market quite frequently are starting to dry up. And I know this is going to sound illogical, and I know if we're saying supply is drying up and people don't want to sell and there's more buyers than sellers, that prices should go up. And I want to be very clear, I've discussed this in the past, but markets are not always rational, and just because it does make common sense doesn't mean the market is going to follow that common sense. And it's actually very similar to when Logan Paul announced he was going to do his second base set first edition booster box break, and people thought that that was going to increase the prices even more and make the hype go even more crazy. And I had warned, or I should say, I kind of cautioned that that may not be the case. And just like here, just because the supply may be drying up, just because we may not be seeing as many cards and there's a little bit more competition for cards, it doesn't mean that the prices are just going to immediately, or even in the next 3 months or 6 months, it doesn't mean those prices are going to just suddenly elevate in price. And so what am I doing right now? I am continuing to buy. I'm going to buy aggressively when I see opportunity, but at the same time, I'm also going to be patient and I'm going to wait for the right price points. I'm not going to get overly excited just because the price starts to move up and FOMO in. I'm going to be patient. I'm going to wait for those opportunities and wait for those deals to present themselves. And I'm going to be buying with the understanding that the prices may not move for quite a while. I'm looking for intelligent purchases. I'm looking for smart purchases. I'm not looking to get rich and make a lot of money overnight. I want a solid purchase that has a good chance of appreciation over an extended period of time. I don't want to stonk. I don't want the cards to just instantly rise in value because of a hype thing or because everyone just gets overly excited about something. And most importantly, I understand that it may not happen overnight, that it may take a while for these prices to start to appreciate and for the market to recognize the value of certain items. And the entire reason that I made this video today is because I wanted to let you know that it is during this time period, these types of time periods is where things get tough. This is where it doesn't always make sense. It doesn't make sense how those cards or those booster boxes or those products that you're looking for, where the supply dries up and the price doesn't seem to move, it's not always going to make sense. It's not always going to be rational, and it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be difficult to buy something and not see the price go up, or maybe even see the price continue to drop, even though everything else seems to be pointing in an upwards direction. And this is the time period where we start to see prices potentially stabilize a little bit, and where it's a little bit more safe for the collectors to come out and maybe start buying some of those cards, those coveted cards for their collections. This is the time where, with prices a little bit more stable and maybe a little bit more secure and much more cheap than they were before, this is the opportunity in the time frame where maybe investors can also come in and get cards and get those key pieces that they believe are going to go up in price in the long term. But during this time frame, if you are worried about the value of your cards, this is where your perseverance is going to be tested. Just like when I was buying Cosmic Eclipse and the prices sat there for so long and it was such an underappreciated set. In fact, a lot of people were negative about the set and didn't think it was a very good set. And now Cosmic Eclipse is considered top tier, but it took a lot of patience to get to that point that we're at today. And the question is, are you going to be like those people in 2017 and 2018 and 2019? And you waited the next 3 years, 2, 3, 4 years, or if you were an Evolutions buyer in 2016, could you survive waiting those 4, 5 years before the prices start to skyrocket up to over $1,000 a box? And I think today we're settling somewhere around $700 to $800 a booster box. And if I say so myself, I think making 7 times to 10 times your money is pretty good returns. And it takes a lot to be able to buy and wait during that time period. It takes a lot to be able to wait that long before you start to see those significant gains in value. And so this is the time when we separate the weak hands from the strong hands. These are the times that when you're truly going to be tested. And while I don't know what is going to happen, I don't know what the future outlook of Pokemon is, I don't know if the prices are going to go up, I don't know if the prices are going to go down, I don't know if this is just the beginning of the hobby and things will continue to go up and there'll be another boom 5 years from now, the 30th anniversary or some other major catalyst event that we'll never be able to predict. Whatever it is, I don't know what is going to happen. But here is what I can say. This is typically when fortunes are made and when wealth is built. Many, many success stories are built on the foundation of tough times. And the universe tends to reward those who can persevere.